How old is it? 11th and 9th grade. They usually come over and take it, but just 11th grader. I think they got it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's 6 p.m., so we'll call the meeting in order for the Upson County Board of Commissioners for Tuesday, October the 25th. And if you would at this time, please rise for our invocation, followed by our pledge. Sir, thank you for coming and taking care of business for us tonight.
Let us pray. Great are your purposes, O God, mighty are your deeds. And with that knowledge, we offer our gratitude to you for establishing this community, for allowing us to be a part of it. We are grateful to be here tonight together to seek your will, to listen, to learn, and to share with one another. We're grateful for the opportunities and challenges that you have seen fit in your wisdom to place before us. We're grateful for the resources at our disposal, for the men and women of this community, particularly those who are willing to use of their wisdom, their skill, and their desire to serve in guidance and direction for the future. This evening, we also express our appreciation for the men and women of our first responders, police, fire, EMS, for their sacrifice and their devotion to duty in keeping this community safe and healthy. Lord, send your Spirit into this place to provide us with wisdom and compassion and a desire to find and do your will as we lift ourselves up to you in trust and gratitude. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. You can join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sir, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, before we get into the agenda,
Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the board, staff would request the commission remove item B from the consent agenda. We haven't had enough time to do due diligence on this, and like a few extra weeks potentially to the next meeting or potentially sometime in the future. But
okay.
staff recommend remove that from consent.
Okay, so modifying the agenda, I need a motion to.
I'll make a motion to amend the agenda to remove item B from the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
So have a motion made and seconded to remove item B from the consent, and we'll talk about it at a later date. Ms. Jones?
Commissioner Ellington?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilder?
Yes.
Commissioner Watson?
Yes.
Chairman Allen?
Yes. Okay. Public hearing?
We don't have one.
No public hearing. Okay. Public comments? And do we have any?
None.
There is one.
He doesn't want to speak.
Oh.
Okay. You sure?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, moving along. All right, gentlemen, next on the agenda is your consent agenda. On tonight's consent, you have approval of the October the 11th regular meeting minutes, approval of the 2022-2023 lease agreement with Promise Place, approval of the 23 holiday schedule, and approval of the 23 Board of Commissioners meeting schedule. Is there a motion on the consent?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Motion made and seconded, approving to the consent. Ms. Jones?
Commissioner Ellington?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilder?
I abstained from the October 11th meeting. I was absent,
Okay.
but the others I approved.
Commissioner Watson?
Yes.
Chairman Allen?
Yes. Okay. Next, we have a presentation. So,
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I would like to handle the presentation. And of course, I'm sure other members of the board would like to chip in, but tonight we would like to honor our friend and former colleague, Russ McGee, who's in the audience tonight. And we want to do that in appreciation for his faithful commitment to his community and to his county for helping us with our situation with EMS last year. So if I could just take us back about a year ago, we were in pretty difficult times. It was a dangerous time in our community, in my opinion. It was a time where we needed real leadership, steady leadership. We needed some assistance, and we knew we had someone in our community that was intimately familiar with EMS services, who had just retired from the state of Georgia, from the Department of. Now she's making me nervous by filming this stuff. I was doing great before she
Come on, roll with it.
From our state office of EMS and trauma. So we kindly asked Russ to join our team for
We kindly asked you, didn't we, Russ? I remember that conversation.
For about 9 months, and I'll be honest. I'll say Russ and I didn't know each other that well, but I'm not sure he even really liked me at that point. So.
Does he still?
Yeah, well, we'll ask him here in a minute. But he graciously accepted, and fast forward, we've got essentially our EMS director sitting right here. We've got one of the best services I've ever been a part of in the state of Georgia, and I've been to a few places. So it simply would not have happened without Russ. Aside from his technical expertise, he helped keep me calm through the holidays, because I could see it on the commissioners' faces. Of course, I wore a lot of anxiety around that time, because this was a really big deal, a transition that was happening very quickly, and it had the potential to affect a lot of people's lives negatively. But because of his leadership, it affected a lot of people's lives very positively. Just to give you an example of what he gave up. And the chairman's not, the chairman gave up his Christmas and his Thanksgiving and his time with his family and friends, and so did other members of the board. But Russ, I remember specifically he canceled a couple of church trips. I think he was even headed to a convention in New Orleans, and he said, "Jason, it's just too important for me." He said, I'm like, "No, Russ, go. I gotta go." And thank God he didn't go. But he stayed with us. He helped guide me through a very, very difficult process, and he really helped us lobby the folks at the state level that at the time were telling us we couldn't achieve what we were trying to achieve. And Russ kept telling me, "We can get this done, just stay on them, we can get this done." Won't go into the details, but here we are. We've got a great service. The board's very happy with it, the community's very happy with it. I'm especially very happy with it. So I'm here to tell you right now, could we have gotten it done? I would have hated to try to find out, Russ. So if you would please come forward and accept this very small token of my thanks and the board's thanks. Where do you go?
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. Let him come up here.
Yeah, y'all come. Come on, man. No, I didn't mean to say that. No, come on. You're dressed more appropriately.
Well, I'm not really. Y'all come on over here, don't be scared.
Yeah, y'all, you get purple.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Got it?
Got it.
Thank all y'all. Appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
Hey, Russ.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Wish it could have been gold later.
Don't change your phone number.
And most importantly, we became great friends. And actually found out we were related potentially.
I'd just say, I'd like to say if I could,
Sure.
that, it wasn't an easy ride. It was a quick ride, and we had to get some things done very quickly. But I think most of you agree with me when I say that EMS is one of the most important services that you have. And if you don't believe that, if you ever need them, you're gonna need them really bad, usually, that's the case. and we've got a super good service here. I'm extremely proud of the work they do, but most of all, this was not a one-man effort. This was a team effort. And Jason, you have supported me all the way through, and every one of these commissioners, I appreciate every one of y'all for what you've done to support us. But it was something that I felt like we had to do for every citizen in the county, and to do it well, we had to move very fast. But I always go back to what, we had divine intervention. We really did, because I go back and I think about what Paul said in the Corinthians, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that was the case here. We had to do it, and we had to do it fast. But only the good Lord helped us through it all and gave us the strength to get it done. So I appreciate everything that y'all done. I appreciate the prayers for everybody all the way through. And please keep supporting the EMS. They're very vital. They're vital to the community, and I appreciate all that y'all done. Thank you, Doug, for all you've done to help us. I appreciate it,
Okay. All right, with that, timing couldn't be better. New business, quarterly report on the EMS from AmeriPro. And
So I have the heat map up, but it's not displaying. Let me give it one more plug in here and see. I can go over the report though without the display. We'll do that later. So I have this really nice heat map that will show you guys where your volume is, especially, well, maybe it's coming.
No, I'm trying something.
Okay. If we get that up and running, I'll show it to you. But what I did in this report, and unfortunately I didn't have enough time to make a bunch of copies, but I'll pass this around. Instead of looking at it like we did the last quarter, I thought it would be interesting to look at it from day of week and time of day, so you guys could get a good understanding of what are the busy times, what are the busy days of the week, what hour of days that happens. Our compliance is still good. We're still 100% on our clock within the city limits, and we're still better than 90% on our clock outside the city limits. So nothing has changed with compliance. Med 48, which is the truck out of Upson, is by far our busiest truck in the two-county system. It looks like, honestly, it's probably going to be a tie between Monday and Thursday as our busiest day. Friday is a busy day, but it's a little bit inflated with cancellations. Sundays are as busy as Saturdays, which is unique in this system. Most 911 systems, Sunday is your slowest day by far. But just to give you an idea, Sunday, 123 calls we've ran since we've started on Sunday. This is just Upson County, by the way. 142 calls on Monday, 130 calls on Tuesday, 133 on Wednesday, 142 Thursday, 150 Friday, and 122 on Saturday. So it's pretty consistent. From a EMS professional standpoint, we love that because it makes it easier to staff. It gives you that steady line that you're trying to achieve. I'll pass this around so you guys can look at it. It's not color, unfortunately, but Jason, I will email you the color for, actually I already have, and you can print that in color for the guys. Our color printer went south on us today. Our number one call volume wise is, believe it or not, is a sick person, which kind of encompasses a bunch of different call types. So when you call 911 and you don't really know what category or what bucket to put it in, you just kind of classify it as sick, and that's pretty normal. If you break that down further, breathing problems, a lot of falls in this community, which you would find with a high elderly population. We also have a lot of what we call our lift assist, where we'll go to a home where a patient has fallen, but there's really nothing wrong with them other than they need to get up off the floor and get back into bed, or off the floor in the bathroom and get back in bed. We do that to the tune of about 5 times a day between Upson and Lamar, which is pretty high. But it's not unusual in a community that doesn't have a full-time fire department. When in a community where it's really high-driven volunteer, that usually falls to EMS for those services.
Well, how about inside the city limits?
Inside the city limits, it's not near as bad. No, sir. Now, I don't have that broken down this way, but I can tell you when I look at the at the call types, and I'll look at, what we do is we look at every cancellation. So if we come to your house, pick you up, put you back in bed, we do an assessment, make sure that you're okay, don't need to go to the hospital, then we cancel and go in service. So we look at every cancellation. Other reasons for cancellation could be refusal. You know, your neighbor may have called, your mom may have called, your wife may have called, we get there and you just don't want to go to the hospital. So we look at all of those, and the ones that we look at on the cancellations, the vast majority of those lift assists are in the county and not the city. But you can, again, I'll pass this around, you can keep the copies, but that basically will show you the call volume types that we do. And then, you know, the compliance is there on all call types. What I was hoping to be able to share with you was an actual heat map, but it doesn't look like this is going to cooperate. So it's in an Excel format, so I'll email it to Jason, he can email it to you guys. But what it is you'll pull up that map, and what's really neat about it is, and I can turn it around so you can kind of at least see what the look of it's going to look like. Obviously, the darker the color, the higher the volume in that area. You can scroll the wheel on that mouse, and you can scroll right down to a street. So if you want to see, and obviously right here, we're talking about this area is Upson, this is Lamar. And you can scroll down all the way, which we obviously know the city of Thomaston. Most of our volume is in here. Second probably to this area here, which is Silverton, I think. I can't see it beyond that. Silvertown. But you can see it's so red right there, I can't even read Silvertown. So there's a lot of volume in there. What this is going to be really good for, and it'll go all the way down to the street. You can keep rolling into it all the way to the street level. But what this will be instrumental in is when it comes time to add more resources, where do we put those resources? Obviously, if we put those closer to where the peak volume is, we have less of a response time, right? Get that aid to the citizen quicker. And my data guy did this in like half a day. So it's the technology's there. It's really easy to do. Once we have started capturing enough of your volume, which we have now, to get those lat longs, we just simply put it on a map and we can show you where those are at. We could also even drill down into it further, and if you wanted to say, okay, where are all my heart attacks? Maybe you guys as a committee will one day put AEDs in the community, and you want to know, well, where's the best place? If we can only put 10 of them, where's the best place we put those 10? And we can drill down and say, okay, we're here are all your cardiac arrests for last year, and here are your heat maps, and it makes sense to put one here, or wherever. And we can do that with any call type. We can look at flu outbreak. We can look at stuff like that. We could even look at COVID, but that was just so widespread over everywhere, it would look just like that heat map. But I will make sure that moving forward we can share this at least through email with y'all, so you can manually, individually look at it. This particular Excel is an older version that doesn't have the 3D mapping on it. That's why I can't show it on that computer. But for some reason, it's not recognizing mine. But any questions for me?
Is it planing out since the beginning?
The volume?
Yeah.
Actually, it's picking up some. Lamar has actually come up about 20% over projection, and you guys are trending about 10% over projection of what our numbers were. There are days that we could use another truck. I think when those days become weeks, then we talk about looking at what that looks like. Again, we're compliant on the clock that we're contracted on, but it's going to come a day that the volume may exceed us being able to be compliant. And that's where this is really going to come into play. I've already been talking in the pre-planning that Pike may join the regional system. It looks like the Piedmont area is probably going to be the best location for a additional ambulance that could help these two counties and possibly Pike as well. And already been talking with the county manager over there about getting into one of those fire stations down there, and I think that's a real possibility when that time comes. But the good news is that we have the data and we can look at that and see where it's at. But to answer your question, both counties are above projection right now.
So as we go through a typical week, I've heard the terms used, level 0, level 1.
Yeah.
So, you know, level 0 means
no trucks in
service
service.
available.
That's mutual aid, automatic aid, nothing. Nothing's in service. And we go to a level 0 pretty close to daily, but what we take into consideration with that is we may be at a level 0, there may be 2 trucks at Upson Regional, right? So we could simply pick up the radio and say, hey, forget the paperwork, get back in service, we got another call.
So when you say that Upson Regional, they're taking a patient,
Correct.
a 911 patient,
Yes.
off the
Yes.
bus,
Yes.
getting
And
them processed in,
that's right.
and then you getting released and
Right,
get back in
and
service.
they're very good, what in our industry, we call it wall time. So how long do you stay at the hospital? They're very good about short wall times there. Our average is about 12 to 15 minutes. And if you look at that from a standard of just across metro Atlanta, they're sometimes upwards of an hour. So that really saves our hind end a lot, to get those trucks back out quickly. And the ER really gets that, and they work with us. Spalding, not so well, but Upson definitely. Spalding's pushing about an hour now of wall time. So, yeah, we're level 1, level 0, often daily.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Could you speak to the board about, speaking of facilities we transfer to,
Mm-hmm.
percentages, Upson Regional, Spalding, and others?
Upson's still by far the most.
Mhm.
I don't know the number in my head. I'm thinking it was 64%.
Mhm.
So about 64% of what we take goes to Upson. And then the rest, with the exception of about 10%, is probably Spalding and Peach. Is it Peach in Macon? Peach, what's the?
Monroe or Macon?
Monroe.
That's Peach.
Peach. That's probably our number 3 door that we go to after Spalding.
Mhm.
You know, Spalding, even though their wall time is long, sometimes it's still quicker to go there and wait that hour so we can get back quicker.
Is it Atrium?
No, I think it's Peach. Is it not? Maybe it is Atria.
No, it is.
Atrium.
They also own Peach.
Okay,
That is,
okay.
they're all Atrium.
Yeah.
So it is, yeah, I know that's the parent company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one data point that we'd heard early on
Mhm.
was the percentage of transports increased over
Yeah,
what
overall.
we were seeing from predecessors.
Yeah, we're pushing about 72%, and I think when we came on board, it was 61, which the national average is usually in the low 70s. I think the highest I've ever seen it anywhere, 78%. As long as I'm north of 70, I'm very happy with that number. Because, I mean, the reality is there are times that 911 is called when it's not needed. Not often, but there are times, especially if you're talking about a car wreck. You may have a citizen ride by, see a car wreck, they dial 911, you get there, there's nobody injured. It's simply a little fender bender. So you got to throw all those into it, and
Is that deconflicted through the paramedic supervisor that's in the quick response
it is.
vehicle?
So what we do is we look at monthly what our transport percentage is by employee, right? So if we have an employee that may be getting more refusals than another, that's a liability stream that opens up for us, and we want to know that. So we end up looking at those numbers, and if they're consistently below 70, we bring them in and try to understand why. Sometimes it could be as simple as they ran a bus wreck that had 15 students on board, and nobody was injured, and all 15 got a refusal, and that threw their numbers out the window for the month. But unless we're asking those questions and investigating that, we don't know that answer.
We see a lot of transfers out of the long-term care facilities in the community. I mean, you get 911 calls there.
Yeah, and a lot in the nursing area, and I think in a community, in the nursing home area, and as well as the assisted living. I don't know that there are any LTACs, long-term acute care, but there are definitely assisted in nursing homes, and you know, in a community that really just has one ambulance service, it's kind of hard to not involve yourself in those. Now, what we have done is we've reached out to 2 of the bigger ones, both in Lamar and Upson, and met with that leadership to kind of make them understand when to use 911 versus when to call it's non-emergency. So we're not screaming through the community trying to get there when there's a LPN at the bedside and all they simply need is their Foley replaced in the ER. So we're trying to mitigate some of that emergency response there, but it's still a response that is worthy of a 911 component, just not emergency.
Is it common for a patient to request to go to a specific?
It is very common, yeah, and in the way the law is written, they have the right to choose the facility within reason. Now, within reason is a very ambiguous term, but what we consider within reason is a 50-mile radius.
But if they request to go to north side,
Then we, by law, should have to take them to north side unless there's something going on in the community, like an MCI, mass casualty incident, something that our protocols dictate that we can say, look, we get that it's your right, but right now you don't get that right because there's something going on in the community. We got to take you to the closest facility. Closest, let me add, most appropriate. We're not going to ever take anybody somewhere that they can't get treatment. But the reality is 85% of the calls we run, any hospital could take care of them. But we like to try to keep them within their network, within where their doctors are. You know, it's easier to get their charts. I mean, it just makes better sense to take them where they want to go, unless they're seeking. Sometimes they'll choose another hospital because they've run out of all their good wishes at the current hospital that they're at.
I really don't want to not mention the one issue that we're having with, and I don't really want to get into a lot of detail other than just for the board's situational awareness is we are having conversations with Upson Regional about emergent 911 transfers out of the hospital. It's convoluted, is that a good word to use? And we're having discourse
Yes.
over this. So it may be something that you know, as a board, we might need to do something. But at this point, I'm just pointing it out that you know, we're having these conversations, and you know, when there is capacity and when there's 911 capacity available, and they call, we respond. We respond to all 911 calls, regardless of where they originate.
Yes.
Now, whether or not we transport is another, you know, that's another question. So, just letting you know that we're having some conversations, and
I
we'll
will
see
tell
where it
you
goes.
also that you're not the only board dealing with that. We were in Ben Hill earlier today, and very similar issues starting to arise there. We're going to reach back out to the state office. They've changed their director and see if there's more guidance there, because it is becoming a problem in other places that are feeling the staffing shortages of paramedics. I think it's always been there. It's just never been an issue because there's been enough. But now that there's not enough, I'm hoping the state will give us some guidance, which will help this board make a decision.
Well, at the end of the day, we're always going to err on the side of that patient.
Absolutely.
You know, but it's a lot of times, even with the 5 ambulance system that we have with Lamar, there are times where there's no capacity available.
Right.
And so if you got a situation where you got to respond, are you going to respond to a 911 call at a medical treatment facility, or are you going to respond to a call that
There's nobody there.
there's no medical
Yes, sir.
there?
Yes, sir.
So, and that's the call that you guys make on our behalf, and
Right.
and that call is being made by your paramedic and
By
your
the
medical dispatch.
supervisor on duty as well as myself. I mean, I had 100 phone calls all hours of the night trying to deal with it, so but that's what I signed up for.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I would add, and this is certainly a fair statement on either side of the coin, and you know, county EMS or hospital. The fact of the matter is that a lot of those times those transfers take a unit out of service for a lot of hours.
Minimum 4 most of the time.
Because if they need a higher level of care, it's usually Atlanta or Macon, and
Yeah,
so
it's not right down the road.
so if you have some wall time and an hour plus drive each way, then you've got a unit out of service for quite some time. So it's obviously when Russ and I and the rest of the staff brought you this solution, we didn't include that as part of it because we're in our minds we're operating in emergency response zone, and that's what we were licensed to provide by the state, not anything else. So when we do have those issues and our units are gone for a while, it can be a problem.
And one thing that I really appreciate about AmeriPro is you're doing what we hired you to do.
Thank you.
our priority was emergent 911 response. And,
And that's all we're licensed to provide anyway.
yeah, so, but, we've only been in this business since February the 12th.
Yeah.
So, we'll adapt.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
hopefully there'll be
When you
a lot
get
of,
great guidance from Russ back there.
yeah, well, hopefully we get some collaboration from our other partners in the community on this and,
I'd like to ask a question.
Yes, sir.
Just, I'm just filling in back a little more here. From your experience in other locations you operate, how is that situation handled?
So, to be honest with you, I've never experienced a situation where the hospital felt that using 911 was their primary choice. But to be fair, I haven't ran a rural area as rural as this. So the state does say that it does happen in rural areas from time to time, but I've never experienced it. And that's in Texas or Georgia.
What about what was the thing where the EMF, Amphia?
EMTALA?
Yes.
So EMTALA does not apply to us or y'all. That only applies to the hospital.
Right, well, doesn't that cover that in there?
It does. There's language in there, but just as any language is how you interpret it. But I can tell you that other hospital administrators that I've spoken to interpret it the way we do. That it is the hospital's responsibility to set up transport. Once that patient is on their property, whether they've accepted that patient or not, it belongs to them, and all the care that needs to be rendered belongs to them as well. And they're responsible for dictating what that care is.
So they're typically contracting with or provide their own.
Yeah, now they did contract with us, but our contract was for a best level effort. So if we have a truck available, and I mean a non-emergency truck, not an emergency truck, then we will send that truck. But when that truck is not available, that's when they decide to use 911 for that purpose.
So they're calling the same person
Yes.
that,
call 911.
Yeah.
You hear the word that I used, discourse?
Yeah.
We'll continue to have
There's
this
a problem,
conversation. And I think, the number that was shared with me was, what was it? Since February the 12th, we're talking 19, 17, something like
Roughly.
that?
Yeah, right, under 20.
Yeah.
And I think it's, there's been a lot more calls than that. But
Right.
that's how many times we
Transferred,
picked a patient up and went somewhere
Right.
emergently with them.
right.
There have been other times that we got there and we're like, this could wait 4 days. It doesn't have to go now. Let's schedule it for in the morning when we can bring a truck down from Atlanta.
Okay.
But only I think it was 19. It's either 17 or 19 times that I would say this is a life-threatening emergency. If this person doesn't go right now, then their life will be at risk.
What about quality of life?
Quality of life, too,
limb,
really. Yeah.
life,
Yeah,
limb.
about the same. Yeah.
Okay.
how are you compensated for transport at that point?
Well, with the contract we have with them, they are payer of last resort. So if there's not a billable means there, we can bill the hospital. And we haven't received payment from the hospital yet, but hospitals historically are pretty slow to pay.
Question, what triggers helicopter rides? One, I live by the hospital and I've noticed a lot more.
From the hospital or from the scene?
Hospital too.
Yeah.
Right.
Do-
From the
From
hospital?
the hospital, yeah, I just noticed a lot more
So I think
helicopters.
a life-threatening emergency, I think their first choice would be a helicopter, but the helicopter is so dependent on weather.
Yeah.
And it might look pretty outside, and they still can't fly depending on what the ceiling is. So it's really a difficult answer to give. I know on the scene side of things, anybody from fire or us can call the helicopter, and we try to pit that against the amount of time it takes them to land, secure a land site, board the helicopter, do the patient. Most people think a helicopter's faster. What I find is if you're within an hour of a facility, you can usually get there by ground quicker than the helicopter can get you there. Because there's a lot of procedural stuff they have to go through before they take off again. And
Have some of the calls to you guys then been a call to a helicopter ride?
yes, on ones that we couldn't take, that were Well, I would have, the few that I looked at did not rise to the level of a helicopter, but they used a helicopter because there was no ground component. Which is not necessarily a wrong use of it, if the patient really needs to get there. Very hefty bill for your citizen compared to an ambulance bill.
Well, look, again, you know, we're learning, not, I hate to say it's a bad term, learning as we go. We're evolving as we go, but I think it's everybody up here, and y'all, you know, I think I'm okay speaking for everybody up here when we say, we always want to err on the side of the patient.
Absolutely.
And we'll, if there's a problem with the discussion about whether or not it should have been done,
Right.
well, that's one of those things after the fact.
Do it and we'll figure it out after.
We'll figure it
Yes,
out.
sir.
And
Agreed, we're the same there.
Nobody on here.
Yeah, what I've told my supervisors, if they can't get a hold of me, if it makes sense for the patient, do it. We'll unwind it later. We'll do better practices after the fact.
The doctor's sitting there saying, I gotta have
Yeah.
this, and
Yeah.
maybe where we argue with the
Exactly.
doctor at the time. Now, we'll come
Exactly.
back and argue with the doctor later.
Right.
If it's the same doctor over and over and
Yes,
over and
sir.
over and over.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
So, because what everybody's gotta realize is, we're taking that resource away from the taxpayers who are paying for this, that expect you to respond within a very finite amount of time when they call you.
Right.
And so,
Well, and no care is being given on those scene calls.
right,
There's plenty of care being given at that hospital.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
We'll
the part
work-
I battle with.
We'll work through this.
Yeah.
And, you know, we kind of went down a rabbit hole, but I personally gained a lot out of that, and, you know, because as we have discussions going forward, you know, you got your guidance from the board here.
Okay, sounds
So,
great.
All right. Well, hey,
Mr.
we really appreciate you.
Mr. Chairman, before we leave that, I do want to say that my friend and my colleague and my counterpart at the hospital CEO, has taken a few weeks off for medical leave. I just want to say we look forward to having him back. I mean, we became pretty close through the pandemic, and I think the chairman could say too that we really are very lucky to have somebody like Jeff in our community. So as he recovers, I just want to say we miss you. We hope you're feeling better, and we look forward to having you back soon.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
gentlemen.
Russ, you got more than you bargained for, didn't you? Hey, we're gonna talk fishing here in a little bit. Where are you going?
Hey,
No, I'm kidding.
I'll stay for
I'm
this.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
The rest of the meeting's free, Russ.
Mr. Jeff is back at work.
Oh, good, great.
He's gone 2 weeks.
Okay.
Thank y'all. Okay, next on the, under new business is discussion and possible consideration on a lease agreement with the Lincoln Park Citizens Coalition. So, gentlemen, I'll pass this to either Jason or Renzo, whoever wants to talk about this and how we got to this.
Mr. Chairman, I can start, and obviously Commissioner Wilder and yourself were a party to the first couple of meetings we had on this issue. And basically what you see is just the beginnings. It's essentially the first draft that English Law Group was put together. And these were just based on my notes from the meeting. So there's probably more work to be done here, but we felt like we would go ahead and share what we've done so far with the entire board, and so they can have some more input into the process. So it's not necessarily on here for approval, but what you have in your packet is essentially some of the terms that we discussed with the Lincoln Park Coalition. And in basic terms, we're saying we're going to make some, the county would make some repairs in exchange for a sub-market lease to them. They would actually control the building, and then they would make the remainder of the repairs, especially as it related to the damage done by the vandalism. And they're pretty well spelled out in here, and they maybe need some more tweaking. But in essence, that facility would be leased to and run by the Lincoln Park Coalition. So it would come out of the umbrella of the county recreation department and then fall under their umbrella for programming and what have you.
So are all these concerns that Pascal listed, it looks like some of them may have been addressed, but we still are missing probably some details from what his comments
Yes,
were.
and I think actually in the back and forth in the emails, Heath had mentioned, and we were discussing insurance, so I think there's a question about insurance that we probably need to dig into a little more. I know that was one of the Lincoln Park Coalition's issues that I'm not sure if that's a sticking point, or like if we have to insure it, they just, and they're unable to, but I know that was one of the issues. And really, the more the concern was the commissioners that weren't privy to the meeting, we're basically looking for guidance on concept. Is this the concept we want to move forward with? It would look something like this. Do we want to get it into a final draft and bring it back for execution, or do we need to look elsewhere?
Let me ask the board this. No, I'm sorry, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I may add something a little later on, but there was a couple of things I saw that I might want to point out, or at least discuss briefly. And I can do it now.
Well, what I was going to suggest is, do we have 20 minutes available at our work session next week so we take this and digest this, formulate some questions, and try to hash this out, discuss it at our work session, 20 minutes probably what it would take.
Sure, and we can,
then bring it back in here to take action on.
Yes, sir, we can absolutely do that, and if there's comments now, we can go ahead and make those changes and have another version ready, so we could be one step further along.
Okay, so
that would be a good thing to do. Have a bigger discussion about some of the things at the next work session. One of the things I would look at, we talk about Lincoln Park agreed to pay the utility bill. Right now, the utility bill come to Upson County. It come to us. Will we transfer it back to them, or will it still come to us and then we forward it to them?
At least the way we sent the notes over, it would transfer to theirs. So
Right,
so the bills wouldn't come here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things.
Mm-hmm.
all right. Well, if it meets with y'all's.
And as you can see, when I say sub-market, I mean, we're, essentially, I think where Pascal and I were going with it, we're saying $5 per year. Well, the in-kind services are the repairs, the maintenance, and the upkeep. So it's not a gratuity in the sense that even though it's a sub-market amount for the lease, they're the ones that are actually doing the repairs, and that's where the equal value is coming from.
And the upkeep.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Have you got I can wait till the work session, but on our part, from replacing the lights and all that, we got a bottom line on what that's gonna cost?
Yes, I don't have it in front of me, but I can take the components out of the original estimate we got and give you an idea.
Okay.
We'll talk about the work session, right?
Next Wednesday. So we'll get more into the details. I think we can get through it pretty quick because I know our work session's pretty hefty already.
Yes.
Yeah. So all right. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't need any motions on this. We'll just we'll look forward to discussing the more details of this at next Wednesday, and hopefully we can we'll move from there. So.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll put a couple of copies of the lease as it stands now in their hands before they leave, so they can take a look at it too.
Okay. You're welcome to this copy. All right. Nothing else on that. Let's next on the agenda is discussion on joint project negotiations with the city of Thomaston, and I'll kind of tee it up. And so, as the board knows, that we've been meeting with the city now for several weeks, probably to the tune of several months, discussing joint projects because we've got 31 December deadline coming out. It's pretty hot and heavy. And so, Commissioner Ellington and I and Jason and Alan Salter, met with the city several times, and we just felt like now's a good time to, kind of bring you up to speed. I know we've shared Jason has shared some notes on the 4 items that we are kind of discussing the most. And so just to publicly, update everybody on where, in our opinion, we are with this. I mean, it's my understanding the city's going to have the same discussion next Tuesday at their meeting. So with that, I just say we just take the four subjects and the 4 joint projects that are really being batted around and go from there. So, Jason, I'll let you lead that if you
Sure.
don't mind, and
Yeah.
when Commissioner Ellington or I have something to add, we can go from there. So.
Well, the information in your packet is exactly what we worked from in our last meeting, and I'm just going to refer to my notes. So if you're looking, we essentially agreed to continue the following with no changes. So Airport Authority, Archives, E911 Communications, EMA or Emergency Management. We opted to eliminate Gilmore Center from the agreement altogether. We're going to keep the landfill post-closure monitoring because we're not doing any other activity but monitoring out there now. We're going to keep the Hightower Library and the Senior Center unchanged. So what that left was recreation, economic development or the Industrial Development Authority, EMS, and then jointly occupied facilities. And then the 5th one, we were considering adding IT to the agreement. So beginning with recreation, in that meeting, both parties tentatively agreed for what I have here as option 3. Essentially just keep it with no change. The only addition is that we are going to build into the agreement 4 dates in which both commission and council will meet and discuss any and all of the ones that exist. So I think one of the things that they were most concerned with recreation, they just want to try to get just kind of be a little more hands-on, get a little better understanding of programming and operations, and they felt like holding us accountable to meetings quarterly would probably serve their purpose and enable them to keep it as a joint project. So my notes from that meeting had us keeping it with option 3, which is no change, except we'll include that as one of the discussions in these required quarterly meetings. The way they pitched those quarterly meetings, and I really liked the approach, was that 2 times we would convene before a county commission meeting, and 2 times we would convene before a city council meeting. So we'll already have expected to be here in the evening at this building, and then we would just meet an hour earlier and convene the joint meeting. During one of those meetings, we would also handle the budget. So we've got 4 meetings set aside, and then everyone can put them on their calendar, and we'll have the opportunity to hash out any differences or talk about changes. And I'll just let the chair or the vice chair jump in if they feel like I missed anything. So for IDA or Economic Development Services, for the purposes of this, I think we agreed to option 2, which was retain as a joint project. And then these are actually Russell's words, but I kept them on our sheet. Both parties receive latitude on annual appropriations not tied to the tax digest and not subject to auto appropriations or funding. So essentially, it stays a joint project, but it doesn't necessarily automatically go to that joint project split. It's going to be an annual appropriation and decision made by both bodies. So the thought there was there may be some additional items that the city would want to fund from incorporated taxes or not fund, and vice versa. The county may have projects that are in the unincorporated area that we would want to fund at a higher level or at a lower level, just depending on what the activity was for that year. Plus, meeting quarterly gives you the option to adjust those budgets as projects come up or things change. So basically it's virtually no change, but it's not an automatic appropriation from the split, if that makes sense. Third, for jointly owned and occupied facilities.
Hey, Jason, let's go back to
Sure.
a second. So option 2, it talks about the funding for the 23 budget cycle to be derived from unassigned undesignated fund balance held by the IDA.
Right.
So,
Sorry, it was a little longer, but.
yeah, that was
Yeah.
the last sentence
And
of that.
Yep. It cut off to the second page, so I didn't read it. And I was actually jumping to facilities after that. It was EMS as the third one that
Yeah.
I need to cover. Okay.
So, again, not sure exactly where our counterparts will, where the city's gonna fall in on this, but that, and Commissioner Allen, you can speak to this, I'm walking away from these meetings with the understanding that that's where we're leaning jointly.
That's what I walked away from the meeting with. I mean, there was a extended discussion between all parties involved in this negotiation, and that's, obviously, we couldn't we couldn't commit to anything. They can't commit to anything without full board's approval, but that was the consensus at the time of the meeting. It wasn't one-sided, it was a consensus of both bodies.
And to my understanding, it's not an end-all, be-all
No.
cut ties. It's gives us the opportunity on an annual basis to, well, one, I like the idea.
And I meant to say what I failed to read, and the chairman pointed out because I didn't flip the page, but the last part about that would be so reports from them would be quarterly, just like, so when we convene the quarterly meetings, we would invite them to come report on activity. So they would be included in those meetings like recreation and the other components would be, so.
Well, I like the fact that we're doing the quarterly meetings, and I think we talked about that in Savannah when we had our joint meeting down there. That was one of the takeaways we were hoping to do, so I'm glad we're getting there. But that's what I just wanted to, kind of clarify, and making sure it was clear that it's not just cut ties, end all, be all. It's reviewed on an annual basis, which I don't think is, I think I'm okay with that. And then I don't think it's asking too much to have a 12-month plan or, a plan that comes before us with some goals. So I like that idea.
And I think the last part about that is it's really not that much different than the way we handle the airport authority. It's kind of similar. So the one thing we didn't say is that, I think we did say that the opportunity to have any one of these joint projects come to those quarterly meetings, and we would just decide as a group. The city would give a list, and the county would give a list, and when we convene the meeting, only those services would be there. But that's the extent of my notes on that.
Okay. So,
Well, one more question, not to back up, but on the Gilmore Center, I know it said we took that off, and I'm trying to remember, because wasn't it a couple of years ago, we were asking for some information that they couldn't provide?
Right.
So that's kind of where we're still at with that?
And I wish
Services evolved into something totally different than
Okay.
it was originally.
Yeah. They actually submitted a budget request to the county this year. They're under new leadership. So we forwarded it over to the city, and, just so they could see what the request was, but it was $200,000, so it was kind of out of the deal.
well, and like Mr. Ellington just said, they're what they did back in the 70s is not what they're doing
Right.
in 2022. So their mission, their scope changed, and so.
So I think the city's on the same page as us. We're going to cut it from the joint agreement. I guess if the city ever needs to fund it at a certain level, they can, and likewise for us. So
Okay.
we'd go to annual appropriation and not be part of the agreement.
Well, so of the ones that we're talking about, the airport, that's an authority. Obviously, when we talk about economic development, we're talking about the IDA, the authority. And, so concerns are that, we appropriate now I've been doing this, about to close year 6, and we've appropriated a lot of money into the IDA, both through the joint projects agreement, where we, the funding where we continue to fund the $245,000 with the city that went towards fund balance there, as well as the operating budget. So I just don't think it's too much to ask for a plan. You know, it's the only time that we get to really have a no kidding discussion on this. I think it, you know, and I'll just go and say this too, you know, it's no secret that this board is very interested in economic development. The results are out there. You know, when you look at what we've done as a board, we've committed $2.2 million for the ARPA money for the wastewater improvements. You know, we renegotiated the water and sewer agreement to allow for that. Something that we may not have, we could have balked at because we had a 50-year agreement on it. We could have fought, but that was not in the best interest of getting things moving from an economic development perspective. How much money did we obligate ARPA money for broadband expansion in the community? I mean, millions. We've done a lot, you know, as a board of commissioners. We took a field trip. We've had the Department of Economic Development down here. We hired a consultant to come and provide some technical assistance from my perspective. You know, as a board of commissioners, I mean, we're doing our part. You know, let's you know, it's only fair that when you look at the amount of money that we've invested in economic development, I don't think it's not fair to ask the development authority, and I'm talking about the development authority. It's a board that generally meets about 11 times a year to give us a plan, give us some goals and objectives. I'm not asking for a lot, and when I say I hope it's us. We're not asking for a lot, you know. But anyway, I think it's the only responsible thing to do for the taxpayers, because I get questioned, and I'm sure each one of you get those same questions about, you know, the investment, return on the investment. So I know it's not an overnight thing. It's something you got to work at for years, but we have been working at it for years, and we are seeing some successes. I mean, this board was instrumental in Ray News coming here. You know, I know it was a team effort, but you know, but let's get some plans and priorities together, and then when we have that as the board that makes that appropriation, then we'll say yeah, because the proof's in the pudding. We've invested for years, and I think we'll continue to invest because we know it's important. I mean, we have all this inflationary growth. That is a huge issue for our community. We need real growth. And, you know, we need good workforce housing. We need jobs. So anyway, did I sum it up?
Yeah, I just want to add this to it. You know, just so, you know, there's a lot of things said and things get out in the community and all that stuff. It was never once discussed. I've heard different terms used, but we never talked about anything other than funding and how we were going to fund it and what we were going to do and what we wanted for the amount of funding that we provided. We've never talked. We've never had discussions that we were going to abolish the IDA. First of all, neither body could abolish the IDA. It's legislative created. It's just the funding. You know, we're not saying we're not going to fund it. What we're saying is that, you know, as a group, we're going to get together. We're going to say, what are you doing? What do you need? And we're going to gauge those results. And as projects come up, as things come up, we have the resources to provide for those things. We're never going to send somebody out to get something that we're not going to try to back with resources. What we're saying is we are the stewards of those dollars. We're handing them over to a board that between us and the city appoints. Those people don't get paid. They're not accountable to the public. They don't get the phone call when something's not going right and ask the questions. So we're just saying to be better stewards of the money, we're gonna say, hey, tell us what you're gonna do and we'll provide the dollars. And it'll be approved by each board. And it's not guaranteeing, hey, we're gonna give you X amount of dollars for X amount of years and move on. Each year it will be determined on an as-need basis. Did that sum it up?
That's my understanding. Any other? I mean, we just need to lean forward and be proactive, not reactive. As this community grows, I mean, there are things that we need to address, like wastewater, water. That's obviously always the big sticky point with us. And we just need some long-term solutions to some of these things, you know. But anyway, we'll get there, because again, this is not meant to build walls. It's meant to collaborate. So we're just saying that as stewards of the taxpayers' money, we want a more a better understanding of what the plans and priorities are. Okay, let's move on.
The next one, Mr. Chairman, is EMS, and that one's actually pretty simple. I think that was the only one we really walked out without a real high level of guidance, only because this issue is just, it's bluntly simple. It's just a matter of, does it become a countywide service? You know, only by agreement, it is not a countywide service. This is if we were not under this agreement, we would not need permission from the city to levy this on our general fund millage. This is an appropriate service that's delegated to counties that we would have the ability to levy on a countywide levy. So it's just the question is, do they want to stay party to it as a project? So, you know, one of the things I left out is that, you know, when we went through the transition, we kept the city, to the extent it was possible, we kept them in the loop to the best of our ability. We copied the city manager and the mayor on just about every communication. We gave them copies of the proposals. We actually invited them to do site visits with us. So we kept them involved at every level. It's just I think they, as a council, are just going to have to decide, do they want to maintain that level of involvement on it, or are they going to just relinquish it back to us? So it's really not any more difficult than that.
Well, you know, and you know, there is a bigger component to this. You know, one of the things that we pride ourselves on, we've had, you know, there's been not really discussions, but there's been the suggestion that, you know, that we look at consolidating government. Well, one of the things that you know, I take great pride in is our joint projects. I mean, joint projects is basically, you know, we're functionally consolidated. You know, that's a huge step. So if we were to talk about consolidating government, if we ever got to that point, because again, this is a concept that is just being battered around. There's a whole lot more to this than, you know, just saying, hey, we want to do this. But you know, when you start looking at service delivery, I mean, you look at how many services we're talking about here.
It's a lot.
So it disappoints me that, you know, we have our partners at the table with us that represent a third of the population here. You know, we represent 100% of the population, but they represent a third. And if you look at that heat map, the highest percentage of the call volume in there. So, you know, so my question has been, is why do you want to, and I think I actually worded it this way in that meeting. I said, why do you want to divorce us on EMS when, you know, joint projects tends to work well for the community? So, not sure where they're leaning. What it comes down to, and I'll just go ahead and say it the way it needs to be said, is who's going to pay for it?
Well,
Who's sending the bill?
The taxpayers.
Who's sending the bill?
Who's sending the bill? Well, we know the taxpayers are paying for it, okay? Y'all hear that? Taxpayers are paying for it. It's just who's going to send you the bill. If if you live in the city this past year, you know, they made arrangements to cover it. They, through joint project, reconcile funds that they had available. If the service goes the way that I think they want it to go, then it becomes a countywide service. I'm telling folks that live in the city, we don't have reserve money from the incorporated residents to pay for this. The only way that we can pay for it, unless somebody's got a better idea, is through an incorporated levy. So, you know, and I think from what I heard is that the city, you know, it's on them too. They don't have the resources to maintain paying for it without a levy. So it comes down to the politics here, folks. I mean, that's what I mean. Just call it what it is. They don't want to. In my humble opinion, they don't want to be the ones to levy that tax on their city residents. They pass the buck to us. That's the gist of it, right? Did I leave anything out?
Strictly political.
So
Nobody wants to be the bad guy. The county doesn't want to be the bad guy, but if we get handed it to it, we can't pay for it.
we got to pay for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, other than through taxation, so the city taxes is gonna go up. If it stays where it's at, they're gonna come up with resources, or either they're gonna have to raise taxes in the city. The county taxpayer won't change, because the county taxpayer is already paying for it.
Yep.
That's right.
So, so it comes down to, in my opinion, the politics that they have to decide is, do they want to stay partners with us in this and do what is going to have to be done anyway?
Right.
Or do they just want to say, we're going to walk away and let you guys do it? I mean, quite honestly, when we first went down this road with the EMS, I told Jason, well, just make it a countywide service and we'll be done with it. But then later on, it was like, wait a minute, you know, we've included them at every step along the way. They're at the table. They say they don't have a seat. Well, they do. At every quarterly meeting we have, if there's a discussion about anything that they want to talk about regarding EMS, that's their time. But if they're wanting to walk away from it, when you look at the call volume and where they're going, you know, it just doesn't make sense to me to walk away from it.
And I will say that there was a couple of councilmen that were pretty, obviously not directly involved in the negotiations when we were evaluating all the services as potential providers for us, but they wanted to stay in the know, and we kept them in the know. I think they were, because obviously they were very interested. Councilman Ed specifically, I can remember, I probably had 36 conversations with him about EMS during that time. Mm-hmm. And of course, as you remember, I mean, you know, we couldn't approve it without their say so. So, you know, we approved an original budget, and then we approved an amended budget with them.
Yeah.
You know. And I would tend to agree with the chairman. If we are going to study consolidation, I would leave it. You know, if we're going to go that route, I would leave it if we're going to study consolidation.
Yeah. Leave anything out there? I mean, that's pretty much cut and dry. So, all right.
The next one, I think we came up with a really fair solution for jointly owned facilities. So, in your packet, under jointly owned and occupied facilities, you'll see option 1, but there's a small caveat to that. You will see what was originally option 2. We agreed in almost everything in option 1, except the county was asking the city to fund capital equally. So with a change to option 1, we would fund capital according to the joint project split. And if these buildings were liquidated, they would be liquidated and proceeds would be divvied out according to the joint project split, which I thought that was an excellent compromise. So in my humble opinion, this one's solved.
So ultimately, it's a pro rata to the usage of your space.
For the operating.
For the operating
Yeah.
sector.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
We agree that any capital would be tier one SPOS and the next SPOS, but it would fall back to, and if you read in the details there, if we need some major capital before we get to the next SPOS, it spells that out basically by footprint. And then
if someone vacates the space,
the other gets the first right of refusal if we're gonna, yeah. We do allow, and this will be in the details when we finally draft the document. The idea is that you can vacate the space as long as you're still paying for it. Yeah, you're not going back to the other entity.
Okay.
You can't just vacate the space and says, oh, that's 50-50 now. If you go to reserve it for yourself, you're gonna pay it like it's yours, so. And I think all those provisions are very fair. So.
The only other thing, Pete, that we asked was that, so we talk about if the property was ever liquidated, if it was ever sold, I'm sure if that would ever happen, there's probably a lot of people in this room that won't be here when that happens. So how do we make that happen? And then I think we talked about putting that in the deed.
Right, the split.
Yeah.
That it split on the joint project split, so.
Next was, we're just gonna simply add IT personnel to the agreement and split that at the joint project split. We've currently been doing it by annual intergovernmental agreement. We ran the numbers, it's within a couple $1,000s of being close to the joint project split anyway. Our IT services are, you talk about a consolidated service, which I think is beautiful. This is an internal management service that we share. And hopefully we can grow these types of consolidations into other things, but I think this is a great first step. I'm proud that we agreed to that. That's obviously a very simple addition to the agreement. Doesn't really require much of anything. Obviously, we're funding our equipment separately, our capital separately, our software arrangements separately. It's just the personnel we're sharing.
a quick question, and I know y'all had a lot to already review and discuss with each other, but I know in Savannah we talked about like code enforcement and some of those bigger, broader, was there any discussions related?
And given the time constraint, I think we've just focused on the ones that we currently have.
I think there's definitely, like Commissioner Watson said, there's definitely opportunities there in the future. Mm-hmm.
And then there was one last piece, and it talked about employees and
project employees.
Yeah.
So employees of joint projects, as we all know, they're all county employees, and they benefit from our benefit package. So, and we know and understand that the benefit package that these county employees have is, even though they're both generous, they're not the same. And in some cases, I think specifically it was family medical coverage where there's a discrepancy. So they are going to propose a formula we can apply to where they would get a little bit of deduct for where county employees have a bit more generous family health care coverage. So they would get a little bit of credit back for that. Because essentially, they make a decent point is that, they're funding their budget and their employees have X basket of benefits, thank you. And then the county has this benefit, so it kind of creates an inequity. So it gives them that a little bit of that funding back to equalize, so that they essentially are not funding what they call a second class of employee. So
medical, that's the big.
Medical is really the big one.
How many employees?
How many employees in the joint projects? Can I give it to you roughly? Roughly.
Airport. Everybody that's on that list.
Oh, that includes airport.
25, 30.
More than that. It's probably in the 60 range.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that concludes my notes.
Yeah. Mine as well.
That's it.
Like I said, I believe when we walked away from that meeting, the intent was for the city to discuss with their council at their next regular meeting, which will be next Tuesday night. The clock is ticking. I mean, as much as we're trying to get this done before the holidays, because you guys got a lot of work to do, staff's got a lot of work to do to get this joint project agreement drafted and executed. We just got to get the terms figured out and go from there. Hopefully, a lot of that work is already happening. It's just these areas here that they can get plugged into it, so.
I got something to say. I just want to tell the board that I appreciate the time that James and Norman spent out of their personal lives to do this, and they've done a heck of a job on it. And, you know, we still got a few more steps to do, but I appreciate everything they've done.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just a general question, how many times did y'all meet as a joint?
3.
Three? And was it, to my understanding, I know we had you guys as our spokesperson, and they had adjustments along the way. Do you feel that they had some consistency in the discussions, or, I mean, I know we don't know what they're gonna decide, but.
I'll just say this, you know, and I even asked it right before we left the last meeting. I said, well, you know, is any of this a problem? I mean, is something, you know, I mean, I thought it went well. I mean, you know, everybody got, it wasn't, nobody was arguing. I mean, everybody said what was on their mind, and then we unraveled it, and then we started trying to put it back together, and I don't think any of it was contentious or anything. And I asked the question, was it? And everybody was, no. I mean, you know, it was a lot of input, a lot of people talk, a lot of listening, and then a lot of talking. So,
Yeah, I was just curious with them kind of changing the people. I didn't know if that would
and I don't know
benefit
if that was related to
just scheduling.
Availability, or if it was more about.
I don't know. But
I know the last one, you know, when Councilperson Reeves was there, I mean, it's been very well known by all of us that, you know, she's had some issues with rec that she wanted to address, so she was there. I mean, and I'll echo what Commissioner Ellington said. I mean, the conversations have been probably one of the best meetings, set of meetings I've had in the 6 years I've been doing this with the city. It's been, that's what I'm saying, this is working. Let's you know, we want it to continue to work like this. But
I would add, Mr. Chairman, that even some of the media coverage, it's not necessarily been unfair coverage. It's not as contentious as it reads in the paper.
Right.
It's just not. So, or on the radio, you know, I was asked to do a radio spot. I hope it didn't come across as like we had any contentious issues, because we did. I mean, disagreements for sure, but yeah, I mean, I like the way Commissioner Ellington put it. We unraveled it and built it back again.
I mean, I get it. I mean, when you start getting into having to levy tax to pay something, it hits home. It hits home with us, and it hits home with them. So anyway, we'll get it figured out, because at the end of the day, you know, especially when we talk about EMS, we've got a very high caliber EMS service that's doing well. To this day, I still have not had a complaint about time to respond or quality of care. So,
I think we did the right thing. Y'all did the right thing, and I think we're doing good.
we just got to get the finished product together, and everybody agree. Both bodies agree with the finished product. I think we're really close. I mean, but obviously they got to go back. We really didn't know where you guys were going to be, and I'm sure they got to go back and have those discussions too. So maybe we're not going back to the drawing table. I don't feel like we are, but.
and we made it very clear from the onset that you know, we don't make any decisions.
Right.
You know, they knew from the onset that we had to come back here, and likewise they got to go back to council. So, all right. Well, I hope that I mean, you guys are, if you have any other concerns, I mean, obviously you can get with us. But I think we're all on board with the way we're proceeding, and hopefully, you know, now that, we've got our side of the story out there, and, it'll answer the questions that any of our constituents may have. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else on that, we'll move along. Comments? Jason, you have anything for us tonight?
Mr. Chairman, I have one, and I shared with a couple of commissioners before we walked in. But as you remember, a few months ago, we adopted a pretty comprehensive right-of-way utility ordinance. Well, I'm proud to say that largely due to the work of Pam at our road department, but others as well, we're about ready to launch our online permitting process for that. But we have also included an emergency utility repair, and we've incorporated the driveway permitting into it. So we've incorporated that into our iWork program. I circulated the draft link to what it's going to look like to an end user, but we're very excited. So our official launch is going to be January 1. We're actually already doing permitting with Highline. They agreed to be our beta tester, and they've been great to work with, and they've been giving us a lot of feedback from an end user. I mean, since essentially we're on the same team, they haven't found it to be too arduous. They've given us some recommendations on how we can streamline, how we can make it better, make it easier to understand, how we can break it into segments. So there are, we're not charging them a fee, obviously, because they're doing our work, but they are going through the process with our staff, and they're getting ready to convert to do the online. So in your top right-hand corner in your iWorks, you should see some new options there, and it should say utility and then right-of-way and driveway, so you can see that permitting happening. But we're going to put a package together before the end of the year. We're going to send it to all the other known users of our right-of-way, utility companies like AT&T, Charter, Windstream, and then try to help them get familiar. We're even going to offer them the opportunity to come in and meet with our staff to try to get used to that. So January 1, we're going to convert to a full-blown permitting with fees and fines. So, and I was telling Commissioner Ellington this before the meeting, the way we're going to handle that is we're going to give everybody a free pass the first time on a fine, and then we'll go to sticking to the ordinance after that. So after January 1, we should be seeing not just the revenue, but the permitting from everybody that does work. And that's going to include our own water utility as well. So even though they're not going to be required to pay us anything, we are going to make sure that that the road department knows what's in the right-of-way. So it's going to be great for our own record keeping. So I think what turned out just to be just utility, we've brought everything else that the road department did in and did it in a one-stop shop. So our staff got aggressive with it, and we're really excited to launch it. So when it's ready, we'll be pushing it out on social media and website and the other places. So be looking for that. Thank you to Pam. Thank you to James. Thank you to Roger. They worked really hard on it there, and they're very proud of it, as they should be.
Okay. Jessica?
I have 3 things. I need dates for the budget work sessions for department heads. Your availability, if you don't mind, for the next couple of weeks. And then the chamber
Banquet.
Saturday.
is November the 3rd. I've heard from some commissioners, but I haven't heard from everyone.
Just one for me.
Okay. And then we've set the Christmas luncheon for December 16th. Employee Christmas luncheon.
Actually, Jessica can make it 2 for me. I'll make my wife sit with me. She might not want to.
I'm making my wife go too.
All right.
Chamber.
Looking forward to it. It's a new venue for
Yeah, I'm
that
excited.
event. And so, okay. Mr. English, you have anything for us you want to talk about? Mr. Watson?
Yeah, 2 things. I know Mr. Russ left, but I did want to say, we're really lucky to have somebody with his knowledge in EMS right here in our community. because we were dealt a pretty tough hand, but I think, I know our staff could have probably done just as good, but it was nice to have his input. And then I'd just like to commend our counterparts to the Fall Festival this past Friday. I mean, it was a really good turnout. I was very impressed. And also all the businesses that, went on the square who really made it happen, so.
Okay. Mr. Ellington?
I just want to thank Jason and staff that participated in this online permitting system that they starting to implement. I think it's well overdue, and I applaud them for the hard work. I briefly looked at some of the stuff that was emailed to me earlier, then I got a file today on it, but those little things like that make a big difference, and it keeps us moving ahead. And I think everybody in here watching or sitting here knows that we did have some issues before. You didn't have to look hard to see issues. We never really knew who was responsible for the issues. At least now we'll know when somebody's working on our right of way, because before it was just a Wild West. You pulled up, you broke out the shovel, the hoe, the machine, and started digging. Whoops, you hit something. So progress. I don't know, Jason, if you got any numbers from the Spooky Trail this weekend.
Not yet, I haven't, but I'll get them to you.
How successful that was. That's turned into a great annual event down at Spur Bluff. I do know that I understand just from somebody that was there on Friday evening that it was. We get a lot of people from out of town that come here for that. I know it sounds very minor, but anytime we draw somebody into our community and let them spend some dollars and then go home, that's great. And it lets them see what we have. And some people come for the first time from outside the community. They come in and say, "That's great. I'm going to come here during the daytime, check this place out." So opportunities. I think we got a couple more one more meeting, town hall meeting with the tax commissioner.
It's coming Thursday.
This Thursday at New Hope Baptist Church. It is a voting precinct.
It's fellowship.
Fellowship, I'm sorry. You didn't confuse me now. Okay, they changed the name. If you haven't been to one of those events and you want to understand the options, that if you hadn't voted yet, if you have voted, you've already seen them, but on the exemptions for Upson County citizens, be a great opportunity for you to go out, allow yourself about an hour and 15 minutes, and they'll go over them with you. If you got questions, you can even ask questions. And it'll just give you a little face time with, and see what other people in the community are asking. And that's all I have.
All right. Appreciate y'all showing up. This coming weekend is the Yatesville Chitlinless Hoedown.
Chicken hoedown.
Yeah, it's going to be a chicken hoedown, for the people like me that really love chitlins, and I really do. I hate that you can't get them anymore, but they're having a hard time. But the festival's this weekend. You want to tell everybody, show up. The weather ought to be good, and maybe next year we'll have some chitlins. That's it. Oh, and I will be at the church on Thursday at 6:30 before we talk about the tax thing. That's it.
What's wrong?
Yeah, I don't have anything except Salem hosted a town hall meeting for the tax commissioner last Thursday night, and he did a great presentation, and we had quite a turnout. and he gave you some really good information. I just wish we had more. We had about 4 to 5 people in attendance. Would have loved to have more, but you know, he had the information. It just wasn't that many people that are here.
Yeah.
I do appreciate the folks that came out, and I appreciate Andy for putting it on.
Is anybody recording those?
No, not at Salem, and
Not at Mountain View or so.
Maybe they'll show up for one on Hannah's Mill.
but it's a worth listening to. I can tell you that. Yeah.
All right, yeah, we put a lot of work into that. Staff put a lot of work into it. You know, we had the easy job. We just voted to do it. And then legislature agreed with us. So now it's up to the citizens to vote on it. So,
Mr. Chairman, can I make when I went to vote, not only did I see the signs for clarification, but the election staff was kind of informing me that a lot of people were getting confused about whether they can vote for just one. You vote for all of them, yea or nay. Right, because
Every single one.
every single one of them. Right, so there are signs up now at the early polling area at the Civic Center clarifying that, but I get it, just in case anyone's watching and hasn't voted yet, yeah, you vote yea or nay on every single one of those. So whether
and unfortunately, and the reason it was done that way was to clear up a lot of old legislation that was out there.
Correct.
I mean, it would have been ideal to have done this with one question, but
Legislative Council told us that was not possible.
it was not possible. So we apologize for the confusion. But at the end of the day, hopefully it'll be a positive result.
If they all get approved, then you can go down to the tax assessor and choose the best one that fits you. That's as simple as the way I know how to put it.
Yeah.
So,
And if anybody wants to approach their school board members for a senior discount from the school board, I would appreciate that too.
Yeah. We can share some paperwork on that. Hey, so I'll just go real quick then. So Spooky Trail, I went the other night. Hats off to everybody, staff that was down there. You know, as always, Paul's down there and his team, and Shaka. She was a very awesome greeter, you know, controlling the gate into, and I saw, you know, Alan was down there, Sheree was down there. You know, too many people to mention. Lacey is, she embraces that wholeheartedly. So if you saw some pictures about Lacey. Anyway, it was very, very good, very well attended. Last Thursday night, I was at the local Republican Party meeting, and I want to thank Sheriff Kilgore for taking the opportunity when he was addressing those folks to remind them of his support and reasoning for asking for the new court facility. Yeah, he once again expressed from his security and safety and efficiency aspect, you know, the need for this. And so for the board, you know, we had a meeting today that lasted probably an hour and a half. And then, so we're meeting again next week, and at our work session, you'll hear more about progress and any concerns that we're having with this project. I got a call today from Mr. McIntyre. I hadn't told you this, but looks like November 7th, he's going to come down for a visit.
Okay.
I know you expressed an interest, so if you just clear your calendar for November 7th, we've got a government roundtable at lunch that day. Maybe he can accompany us to that, or meeting that morning and all that. But we want to definitely talk about the bridge projects and the other things that we've got going on. Comp plan surveys, I again encourage everybody, if you've not done your comp plan survey, please do it. Time is running out on that. And last but not least, voting, please vote. It sounds like a lot of people are. So is there any other, oh, by the ways, if there's nothing else, the next thing on the agenda is an executive session, and the reason for the executive session is personnel and potential litigation. There will be, we have no action to take on that. And I suspect this will probably only be 15 or 20 minutes, I hope. And I hope I got a kid at soccer I gotta go pick. So with that,
I've
is,
got babysitters at home.
is there a motion to go into executive session?
Yeah.
Is there a second? All in favor? Okay, unanimous for going. Thank y'all all for coming. A lot of good info tonight. We're still live.
Wednesday's first. Did I get set up?
And they have to
Sarah
be the
Williams.
same
We're
way.
gonna try to do it in here.
Okay.
We haven't sprung it on.
Not including anyone.
Parrish is
We
gonna,
help.
Parrish is gonna be here for about an hour and a half with the whole board, so.
800.
Meeting Tuesday
That is.
and another meeting on Wednesday.
Thank you.
To try back.
You're not going to do the chamber?
Inspections.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do it. I was just trying to see if this. Just putting it down for, me and her will do it. Or not.
We're still live?
Yeah, we are, sir. They're gonna stay here.
We're going in there? Yeah, we're going there. Soundproof. What was it? Get Smart? The little cone that came over? Remember that?
Yeah.
Termite.
What was that, is that Peter Sellers?
No.
That's water.
Oh, wood, huh?